Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. Dan Infalt, we're live. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So the show title today is The End is Near. And for a lot of people, the end is near. It's mid-December. My season's already closed. I know a lot of seasons around the Midwest and January 1st. There's a few that go a little later, some special hunts and stuff. But getting down to crunch time, and for people that are still holding a tag with Christmas coming up and a lot of people trying to spend time with their families and New Year's, the clock's ticking. So what do you think about that?
I kind of feel like the season ended and now it's about to restart, like it's starting again, you know, because there's kind of that lax with the muzzleloader ending and doe season taking over, and I didn't hunt for 4 or 5 days, and it's kind of weird, you know, at this time of the year not to hunt. But now we're gonna have a short period here where I can buck hunt in Wisconsin before they start the damn doe season again. And then when they start the doe season back up, we're going to celebrate our Christmas, and then I'm going to take off probably to Nebraska, maybe to the UP, but probably to Nebraska, and do some out-of-state hunting while they're doing that doe crap here, and then come back. So I'm kind of looking forward to going into that. And then when I get done with my out-of-state hunt, Wisconsin will go back to a regular season that it's extended to January 31st. So I'll be able to hunt all of January for bucks. Technically, you can shoot anything during that time period, but a lot of deer will be shed. I mean, I've got friends that live around me that have been finding sheds like crazy.
You read my mind. Yeah, I was going to ask you what.
They're about to do a 10-day doe season.
Yeah.
when the bucks are, you know, starting to shed. But there'll still be bucks all the way through January that have antlers. There should be less of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I follow a bunch of shed hunting posts. I like to shed hunt, shed hunting forums. And not that I've seen a ton, but I have seen a bunch from different states, you know, a few here, a few there, where bucks are being in the shed. And I think, you know, a lot of factors go into that. The doe, amount of does, if the bucks beat up from the rut. We don't need to get into all that, but it does seem regionally that there's some changes, like southern Montana even versus northern Montana. It seems like the bucks hold on a little later in the southern and the eastern part. In the northern part, they shed pretty quick. What about around you? Obviously,
they usually hold on pretty good around here, but certain bucks will have more stress than others, and certain ones it's genetic. They drop early every year. Some bucks hold longer than others. I got a shed antlered buck on my trail camera this morning.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Younger deer, older deer? Couldn't tell.
He didn't look that old. He was either 2 or 3.
Okay.
One of the two. I'm not sure which deer it was or whatever. I don't give very many bucks on that camera, but 2 spots, no antlers. You know.
Well, Dan, let's shift gears here real quick. There's some news that came out, and I don't know if it's been a week yet, but something that we talked about that was real popular a while back. And let me share the screen here. So our friend CJ Alexander, not really our friend, I say that loosely. I don't want anyone to think that he's actually my friend or Dan's friend. That was a big story, obviously, for a lot of reasons, because of how he went about it, the lies that he told, and the podcast and stuff. So he just recently got sentenced. So this is from December 12th. So yeah, since last time we were on the show 5 days ago. And I wanted to read some of this and get your thoughts on it. But the headline's pretty telling. It says, CJ Alexander to serve time, pay $43,000 for poaching giant Ohio buck and trying to cover it up. And this is on, if anybody wants to read this, outdoorlife.com. You can read the full article. I'm just going to skim it here. But it says the Attorney General also ordered Alexander to pay a combined $43,000 in fines, and his hunting privileges have been revoked for at least 10 years. And I think I read in here somewhere that it could be beyond that if he fails to pay the restitution amount. So they got him pretty good.
Got like 4 or 5 years to get it to pay that $43,000, or he's got to go back to jail.
Something like that. Oh, yeah, here's the bullet points. Let me read.
It came out to something like eight grand a year or something.
Yeah, it says he's going to serve 180 days in jail with 90 days suspended and the other 90 days served at the Star Community Justice Center before he can be eligible for work release. He's got to serve 5 years of community control. I'm not sure what that means. He's got to pay $39,696 to the Ohio Wildlife Fund and $2,000 in restitution to KSE Sportsman's Media, DBA Outdoor Sportsman's Group. Not sure what that's about. Maybe he got paid to be somewhere at an expo or something. I'm assuming it's something to do with that, or they paid him to come on a podcast or something, and now he's got to pay them back. He's got to pay $1,000 in restitution to the poaching hotline, $1,000 wildlife fine and court cost. He's got to enter a 4 to 6 month community-based program through Star Community Justice Centers, write letters of apology to affected parties, forfeit all hunting-related property seized by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and he's going to lose his hunting license for a minimum of 10 years. Oh, yeah, this is what I read. If full restitution is not paid by then, the license remains revoked until payment is made in full. So he's got to pay up all that money or never hunts legally again, which maybe that's not that important to him from the sounds of this. But anyways, that's the highlights again at outdoorlife.com if you guys want to check out the full article. But Dan, hefty fine and big punishment. We've talked about this. Sometimes we feel like the fines are too light, and I don't know about in this case. You think this is too high, or how do you feel about that?
I think it's a little steep, but man, he deserves it.
Yeah.
But I think when you talk a whitetail, it's hard to believe it's worth $43,000. I mean, he was trespassing, correct? He's like stole it off of somebody's property.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it should be steep, but 43,000, holy cow. And he probably lost his truck out of it too when they were confiscating gear, and probably has to continue his payments. But the thing that really, I think, screwed that guy was they did it like a homicide investigation. They got a hold of his phone records, his text records, and everything. They subpoenaed his phone records from his phone company. And I think that's why they were so bold about going after him. If you remember, I was like, what do they have for evidence? Well, they had that hidden. They had it in their back pocket. They had his texts. And he was texting at the time he was sneaking onto that property with his wife about going in there and going after this buck, and about honey, this is going to be stupid money. We're going to get enough money to buy a house off of this, and bragging about how much money he was going to make from stealing this buck. And that will jack that fine way up when they see stuff like that, when a judge sees that and stuff. So to that degree, I understand. But it's hard to believe a first offense on any deer is that high, Yeah, I would think it. If you took away the whole bragging about how much money he was going to make thing, I think 10 grand his truck. I don't really think any amount of money makes that much of a difference, because the act of getting caught, I mean, that guy is going to be world renowned from now on, as that's the poacher guy.
Yeah, for all the wrong reasons.
Nothing he does ever matters again. I mean, he can just give up hunting. Nobody's going to want to be around him. Nobody's going to believe anything he ever shoots or anything he ever does again. He's going to be embarrassed to be around the people that he looked up to at one point in time. And I think that's way more punishment. And I don't think it needs to be $43,000. I don't think they need to ruin his kids' lives, his wife's life, his family's life. I don't think they need to do that. I think he should struggle and have to pay something hefty back. But I think $43,000 is getting a little ridiculous. I mean, where do you stop? What about when they start finding people $1.5 million? Or it gets a little nuts. And another thing with those fines and stuff. I mean, in this case, this guy's absolutely, obviously guilty. But I have seen a lot of cases where it was, up in the air. Is this guy guilty? Isn't he guilty? And it turns out the guy wasn't. And what they do is to get one of those people where they don't have enough evidence to prove he's guilty, is they put the fine way up there and say, plead guilty and we'll drop the fine. And then these guys will plead innocent or whatever. And if they lose, they're going to pay this huge fine. And, I think they're going to scare some people who are innocent into pleading guilty if they're just going to lose hunting rights or something like that because of fines. I think they're playing a little bit, devil's advocate there. That's just me. I think a lot of people probably disagree with me. But I think a $10,000 fine in this case would probably be adequate. I think it would do the same thing that the $43,000 is, and only with the $10,000, it probably wouldn't affect his family and his kids as much, who are probably innocent in this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely one of the bigger punishments I've ever seen, but also, like you said, one of the more egregious crimes I've ever seen when the evidence came out. As far as just the way he was talking, and I don't know if this should even matter, but the caliber of the buck too, right? That's a public resource in some ways. I don't know how much time that deer was on public land, if at all, but I don't know.
But I mean, if a guy's going to poach and he's going to poach big bucks, if he sees ones that's 150 or 160 inches, he's going to go poach it, right? What is so less worthy of that buck that's a $2,000 fine, that this buck here, just because it grew antlers a little different, is suddenly worth more? It's like saying if you murdered the president of the United States, you should be executed by pinpricks, just sticking needles in you till you die. But if you murder some guy who's homeless, well, yeah, you get a fine. It just seems weird that they can value the animals differently. I mean, because I really don't value that score that much myself. I mean, it's not the world record or anything. It's just a real big buck.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thought we'd talk about that and hear what you had to say, because, again, we did a show about that when he first pleaded guilty, and a lot of people, I don't know, since that's recent news, I don't know if people had seen that or not. And while we're talking about poachers, Dan, you sent me one other article this week here, and I hadn't seen this one, so you'll have to take the lead here.
I don't know a whole bunch about it, but I've been getting messages about that like constantly.
Yeah, it's on the New York Antler Outdoors Facebook page. It says, here are the photos and trail cam video footage of the huge poach buck from Fonda, New York, amazing whitetail. And then the caption, this Chris guy says, had an opportunity to hunt this buck the last 4 years. Sad to see him go the way he did. Glad there was some justice served. And pretty cool looking deer here. Huge palmation, kind of looks like a moose almost. But that's all I know about this one. So I don't know who told you about it, or what'd you hear, Dan?
I know about as much as you. I just got what you got right there sent to me by a bunch of people.
Yeah. So if we got any New York people,
somebody in our audience probably knows more about it than we do. Maybe they can chime in.
Yeah, the Big Bad Wolf said King Louis. So apparently this was a well-known deer. So if anybody knows more of the story, drop it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it. But every year, unfortunately, we hear about these things, the poaching incidents. And Dan, I want to get your thoughts. I was talking to my buddy, and it was after the CJ Alexander got sentenced. And I said, and not that I want to make this very clear, not that I've ever poached, and I always try to follow every law to the utmost extent. But I feel like every year, and I don't have a world-class collection of bucks. I just got several pretty nice ones, right? Nothing crazy. But every year, I feel like I want to be more careful, because I'm worried if something like that happened, and again, it wouldn't be deliberate, but let's say I broke a game law somehow and got caught. I would worry that would like invalidate everything I'd ever done and call everything I'd ever done into question. And I know that's at least part of the reason you film, right?
Yeah, it is, because I get blamed for stuff all the time. And having it on film is really nice, because you can walk right out there and show right exactly where the camera was, where the ground is. You look at the trees, you can look around. So that helps a lot from my point of view. However, I mean, I could inadvertently do something illegal and not know it and capture myself on film
That's true.
and give them ammo. You know what I mean? It's really easy to make a mistake in hunting. I was out bow hunting this year, the weekend before pheasant season opened. And a guy walked under my bow stand with his dog, parked right in the main parking lot, hunting pheasants. I was like, what the hell?
A little early. Yeah.
I mean, people make mistakes. I mean, I talked to a guy the other day who was about to go out bow hunting during the gun doe season, and he's all in camo. And I'm like, "You're going bow hunting?" He was like, "Yeah." He ended up going home because he didn't know it was doe only season. He doesn't gun hunt. Well, you got to keep up with them laws.
Yeah.
They can stop a season for something. They can start a season. They can do all kinds of stuff, especially go out of state and stuff. Like looking at these out of state trips, you tend to just look, is bow hunting open? And they'll have their bow hunting season, but is muzzleloader open? If it is and you didn't check, maybe you have to wear orange.
Right.
Maybe there's some requirements. Not to say that that's going to get you a $60,000 fine.
Right.
But you could end up, going into a property, going on the wrong property, going across a border, misreading your onyx or something, and you end up on somebody's private property. You shoot a buck, and it's considered poaching, or you can get blamed for something. And it's to the point now where some of these fines and stuff, and the way they railroad you need a defense lawyer. I mean, you could really get into some serious stuff if you did something potentially wrong. I mean, a lot of people don't even understand how severe it is if you shot a deer in Iowa and drove it home, or just caped the head off and drove it home with the brains in it. The fines you can get from each state, and I mean, it can be federal fines where you lose your hunting rights, your gun rights, everything, over driving a deer home that you shot legally. There's so much crazy stuff out there that it's hard to keep up with sometimes, and it'd be easy to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think you're necessarily looking at a $40,000 fine for doing something accidental, but you're still looking at a ticket and who knows what. So good advice to anyone.
I'll tell you, I've seen things like there was a kid in Waukesha County, and you can look this up because they've got it. They got literature on this. Wisconsin has what they call their Hall of Shame instead of Hall of Fame.
Sure.
And it's a wall of shame. I mean, and it's a wall that they take to deer shows and stuff that has all these deer that were poached that are really big from Wisconsin. And one of them in there was a 14-year-old kid that was hunting in Vernon Marsh in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And I talked to him about this. He was on a little island in this water swamp in a tree, and his dad was about 100 yards from him. And the way the law worked at the time, his dad had to be within sight or sound of him or whatever. So he was, but he wasn't right beside him. And this big buck came through, a 14-pointer or something like that. And a kid shoots it, and it goes down. And he yells to his dad, he got it. And his dad gets down and starts coming over there. And the kid, excited because he shot this buck, gets down out of the tree, goes over to the buck, drags it up onto to this little island out of the water, waiting for his dad, while the warden was watching him with binoculars. And they seized that buck, fined him, took away his hunting rights and everything because he didn't tag it before he moved it.
Oh, geez.
Because at that time we had a bag tag. And now he got in all kinds of serious trouble. And I can kind of guarantee you that if that was a forkhorn, the warden would have came over, slapped him on the back, said, "Nice buck, but next time tag it before you move it." But that was a 14-pointer they can put on their wall of shame. A 14-year-old kid that'll probably never hunt again because he was so tainted by what happened. And when you read the article that the DNR has on that, it doesn't really say it like that.
Yeah.
It makes it look like this kid's an outlaw. So, I mean, there's two sides to every story. Now, in the story about Alexander, I think it's pretty much cut and dry now. I think we know the facts. but it's not always that way. A lot of times you get a story and the facts don't really, the story might be factual, but it's said in a way to make it look worse than it is, you know?
Yeah, there's certainly different degrees. I think anybody that's reasonable would say that those two stories are pretty different. At least I hope they would. Dan, let's do Lathrop and Sons real quick. We got quite a few people on tonight for mid-December, 330. So pick a number 1 to 330, closest one, or if we get an exact match, we'll do that, but closest one without going over. And you guys know the deal. One guess only. What am I missing here, Dan? One guess only, close without going over. If we don't have an exact match on the hour, we'll announce a winner.
You're missing Ashley. Where is she?
Yeah. So, Ashley, I think Ashley couldn't make it today. So, guys, be patient. I'm going to be watching the chat. And if I'm looking over here, it's not because I'm ignoring Dan. I'm looking at the YouTube chat. So, we'll let that run for a minute. And Dan, entertain the crowd here for a minute while I watch these numbers, because we get a bunch right away.
Oh, do I look like an entertainer?
Dan, let's get an update. Dan, people always want updates, and the funniest things I see all the time is whatever happened to the Bandit poopers, if anything. And also, we were kind of talking about your building. That's always a popular thing. So let's get some updates there. What's going on with those items?
All right, so Bandit poopers are gone.
Yeah, that's good.
The job's over. Bandit poopers gone. No more problems with them. The building, it is still at a standstill, but we've been starting to accumulate some insulation and some plywood for the inner walls. Starting to prep things to get ready. And right after the workshops in February, we're going to start getting set. We're going to start putting concrete down, put the walls up. That's the plan. Get a furnace in there, and maybe even put a little studio in there for doing this. And then maybe we can do live shows. We can have an audience. We can invite people to come watch. That would be cool.
That would be cool. Yeah. I don't know,
Yeah.
Dan, you probably never watched it, but Michigan Out of Doors with, I think that's what it's called. Fred Trost, people from Michigan would know. They used to have live audience sometimes when they did some of their stuff for their big buck nights, and that was always cool to be interactive. So, I want to
think about that building's big enough. I could fit all 3 of my fans.
Yeah, all 3 of your local fans.
Right.
We did get some information. A couple things here, real quick. Bomad Outdoors sent in a super chat, so thanks, Bomad. Appreciate that. And then where did I see it here? James Sweeney. Remember, James Sweeney said, "I live in the town." This is going back to the New York buck. "I live in the town. The buck was killed. A close friend had a lot of history with the buck. Poacher shot it with a spotlight out of a pumpkin field. 140-inch buck in our area is a buck of a lifetime." So a little more info there. Thanks for that, James.
Yeah. Did you hear about that? I don't know if we talked about it. Did we talk about that lady that took the kids out and they shot over 100 deer?
Yeah, we did that a while ago. I think we talked about that. Yeah, they were like teenage kids, and the lady was driving around. Did they get
see what she gets out of that? I bet she don't even get that stupid $43,000 fine. You know, she probably get her hands slapped. She was the only adult involved, but and you got to wonder, she's not even related to these kids, what she was doing with these teenage boys. But just a weird circumstance. And I want to see what she gets out of that.
Kind of weird all the way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just monitoring the chat here 1 second. We'll get caught up. So, what was I going to say? Oh, we're going to do a bunch of Q&A today. So, guys, if you have questions, late season questions, anything for Dan. We've had a lot of guests on, and when we have guests on, we try to keep the questions to the guest. But, Dan, I imagine you got a backlog of questions people want to know, or their specific setups for late season or anything in general. So, drop those in the chat when I get done scrolling through the first wave of numbers here. We'll start asking some questions. So, Bomad Outdoors, this is just a general comment, says, "You guys have enough watch time hours to monetize in one episode, and some YouTube channels have it in a year. So I think they're talking about how many views you get on the podcast. So yeah, the live shows have been popular. I think probably average seems like around 7,000. And I look just from 1 week. So from the week prior to the next show, I usually look and see what it is. But there's been a couple of them, like the ones with Aaron Warburton, the one we talked about, CJ Alexander. Some of those got over 20,000 views. So some of those have been real popular. The one we've talked about this too, if people didn't catch the last show or two, Josh is going to be coming back, Josh Talker, after the new year to take over the hosting duties. And he was on 2 weeks ago now, Dan. And that show did really well, 15, 16,000. So I think people are excited to see Josh back. You guys can get rid of me, although I will fill in occasionally if Josh or Dan need a day off. So that's good too. Let's see what we got for questions here, Dan. Dan, when is it time to abandon the swamp and the cattails? That's from Elizabeth Williams.
That's a hard question, because some places deer migrate out of the cattails and the swamps onto the higher ground, and some places they don't. And in some places, some of them do, and some of them don't. The marshes around my house that are huge and immense, some of those deer will not leave. No matter what you do back there, they won't leave. But the majority of them do when it gets really deep snow and ice and such. And a lot of them leave when the ice gets real thin and they're breaking a leg through. They take 2 steps to break a leg through. It cuts up their legs. They can't walk on the stuff. They're falling down. They'll get out. This year, during gun season, a lot of you probably noticed we did a little better this year. Well, the ice was like that in the swamps. The swamps were flooded. Well, I take that back. It wasn't really ice, but the swamps were more flooded, and it was pushing those deer to the edges, right on the edges, made it easier to kill them. And if you look at when that ice gets thin and stuff, it'll do the same thing. It'll push those deer to the edges. They won't really leave the swamp area in a lot of cases, but they'll bed closer to the edges, more like just outside of the water, up into the spots where normally there was a lot more pressure. That ice is going to be a big deal. Snow is going to be a big deal for pushing them out of there, but it's not going to completely remove them. And dry swamps or swamps that never freeze, probably you ain't going to get the deer to leave. You're going to get more deer in there in the winter because they're going to go there because you're going to have a lack of cover everywhere else. So the swamp's going to have more cover. Like by me, they'll go to those edges and they'll still use that swamp for escape. If they got to escape, they'll run into the swamp or the cattails or whatever it be. But if you get into something that's drier or in an area that doesn't freeze, when winter comes and everything turns brown and the leaves fall down and everything kind of gets open, that's the only place where there is really good cover, places to hide,
Yeah, you made a good point about swamps that aren't as wet, like Michigan. A lot of times the cedar swamps still have a little bit of water in them here and there. I mean, it depends on the cedar swamp, but a lot of times when winter gets hard, that's a food source too. So you do get deer yarded up there, especially in Dan. You probably know, you've been to the UP, so that's the place to be in the winter up there.
Yeah. Cedar swamps are great up in the Northwoods in wintertime, even middle of winter.
We had another question here. Samuel R. Sand says, will you and Mario do another video hunt?
A video hunt?
I don't know what that's.
You mean together?
I'm assuming so.
I don't know. He mainly just hunts his conservancy, and he's got some private properties he goes to. And I just kind of really love the public. When we do events, like we do road trips and stuff, we always invite him. He usually don't go. He's got young kids. He's got kids in sports. He's his elderly mother lives with him, and he takes care of her. He's got a lot of things going on. So, we don't hunt much together no more.
Yeah, it's hard when you get busy, especially family, kids that age. That takes up a lot of time. Trout and Morels wants to know, hey, Dan, how do you go about hunting around beaver ponds and small creeks? I don't know if that's right now or just in general, so maybe touch on both.
Yeah, I kind of look really close at the openings around them. Look for dogwood patches and stuff. A lot of times when you get into big woods, which I think is probably what he's referring to if he's talking about beaver ponds and creeks, you look at those creeks on an aerial and you'll see openings. And a lot of times those openings will be around a beaver pond. You might see certain shapes in the way the opening goes, where it leaves where it enters the woods kind of thing. And a lot of times those areas will hold the bucks, right on the transition of the woods and dogwood or whatever it is. But I'll be looking really close at the vegetation types, the thickness, the stem count, and the shapes of the openings, wind direction and stuff at those openings. And they'll attract me. I mean, I'll travel through timber quite a ways to get to those areas because everything else in those big woods areas is kind of monotonous, But when you get to those creeks, that's what gives them the terrain features they need to have a bed where they can be protected, where they can set up where you can't get to them without making noise or showing yourself or getting winded. That's why they bed in those transitions. That's why they bed in on the edge of openings and stuff. And those beaver ponds will give them that and also give them food at the same time, especially if they're active with beavers, because beavers will cut down the poplar trees and stuff. And poplars are main food source in big woods. And it grows low down by those creeks and stuff. And when they cut them down, the regrowth is what those deer really want. And if they cut down an actual tree, it's like they just created a food pile. And you'll see all those deer congregate to those trees, especially if they cut down a tree in late season. I used to know old timers in the Northwoods that used to talk about when they would hunt back in like the 60s and 70s, they would cut down a tree as a bait pile and they would hunt over it.
Really?
They cut it out a week before gun season, then they'd hunt over it because it become a food source,
I had a few things that I was going to mention, and Dan, you literally hit them all. Why I think those beaver ponds are good. Yeah, like you hit them all. The vegetation.
Sorry.
No, it's good. That's good. That means I'm a good student. You're a good teacher, I think, because all the things that I had to say were there. So Steve Denoyer says, and Dan, maybe talk about the workshops in general. So he wants to know, are you doing a hill country workshop this spring? And before you answer that, do you have any dates yet, or when are they normally? And if people want to get on the list for those, how do they go about that? Let's try to do all those.
Okay. So workshops are something that we put on pretty much every spring. It's a few $100s. You get a meal. It's the whole day. You spend a day with me. The ones I do by my house, I think are the best ones. And the reason being is because we go to actual spots where I hunt and have hunted public land and look at some of the spots where I've killed some giant bucks. We look at the setups, look at the bedding, look at why they were bedded there, how they came through. I really don't get anybody that walks away unhappy. Everybody enjoys the class. And we do those usually starting in about February. And the reason we wait till February, I like January a lot, but there's still people hunting in January in Wisconsin. February stops the hunting. Then we're not interrupting anybody. And we do them rain or shine because some people fly in. So you get stuck with whatever weather we get. We have a meal afterwards at a friend's building. And maybe next year it'll be at my building. But make sure I talk to every person at the meal that wants to talk to me. And it's really a good time. If you know anybody that's gone, ask them about it. Yeah, it's a great time. As far as hill country, we may. I'll have to look for a place to go. Last year we went up by Eric's place, and not Eric, the guy I hunt with, Eric Husman, and looked at the property by him. and that was pretty fun. And we may do that again this year, but it's not a place I've actually hunted. We go in there, we look at it like, okay, let's look at these hills, look at where deer should bed, go in there and check it out, see where the bedding is, if it's where it should be, talk about why it's where it is, how the deer come out here, where we would set up. So it's a little different than the one by my house. But Eric has some input too, because he's hunting some of that. So he's, and he shoots some pretty good bucks over there. He shot a 170 there a few years ago. But I haven't planned anything for hill yet. But I will probably do the ones by my house, which are basically marsh, kind of what you'd see in farmland, marsh, wooded areas around, the Midwest. But it pretty much covers a lot of everything, We'll do those probably the first weekend in February and probably the third weekend, but I don't have those dates locked yet. But it's probably going to be 2 weekends in February, and it's a 1-day class, but I'll do a class on Saturday, I'll do a class on Sunday. And then I'll do a different weekend where I'll do a class on Saturday and a class on Sunday. And generally, we fill up on all the Saturdays. Sometimes we don't quite fill up on the Sundays. Sometimes we do. There's been times when I filled up both weekends really fast. And if I don't have another one scheduled, that's just it for the year. And I know, there's been times when people can't fit in. So if you really want to go, sign up right away. Just make sure you show up if you sign up, because you're taking somebody's spot, if you don't. If you want to know anything else about it, or you want to make sure you're contacted when the dates are locked in so that you can get in right away, what you do is you send me an email. And the first thing I do when I figure out the dates is I lock that in, and I make up a description of what's going to happen, and I send it to everybody that's emailed me. I go through and I look for all the emails about that have workshop in them. I search workshop, and they all come up, and all the ones that are in the last year or so, I will send that to before I put it online, because when I put it online, it'll fill up immediately. But I want the people that were questioning about it and asking about it to get first dibs. So I send it to them. I wait like a week so they have time to see the messages. And then I let the internet fill it up. So if you really want to go, send me an email, and you'll get an email in return when I'm ready. And the email is thehuntingbeast@aol.com.
And here comes everyone making fun of Dan for having an AOL email. Different
Correct.
time, all right? That just means Dan was there for the beginning of the internet.
That AOL email is like 800 years old.
Yeah. That means you're at least 801, Dan.
Yeah.
Frisco 94 says, guys, do you ever see scrapes open back up in December?
Yeah. When they're rutting. If you don't understand how the rut is, how the rut works is you got about a week, 10 days of kind of rut, like around November, right? And around early November, varying in different states. But then 30 days after that, the does that didn't get bred in the first one come back into heat, and then fawns start coming into heat. And 30 days after that, any remainers will do that. And that's why you get some fawns that are runts, because they're just bred later. They're from like the fawn does that were a month later or something. But each period of time when they kind of come back into heat, it's way less intense. And pretty much, I mean, I would describe it as really, once you get to like 20th of October around here, rut really doesn't stop. It just has a real peak in the beginning, but there's on and off action the whole way through. But you'll see chasing all the time, just randomly. You'll see bucks walking past does, paying no attention. Then also one day they'll be chasing some fawn around because she came into heat or whatever. But once you get into like January, early January, sometimes you see a little of that action. And I actually can remember once when I saw some pretty good rut action in early January with a couple of fawns that were grouped up in a feeding area. But usually once you start getting into January, if you're still hunting, they start getting into more desperate feeding. Once the antlers start falling off and stuff, it's kind of over. Then they just get right into that bed to food thing. And they kind of do anyways after that first rut, like after gun season, at least in the Northwoods. But there's just little tiny peak areas where all of a sudden they'll start breeding again. What you got to remember too, though, is there are some scrapes that are just used all year round and have nothing to do with breeding.
That mirrors my observations too. And people that, if you don't know, I talked to that deer biologist from Penn State University, and I didn't know this prior to talking to him. The second rut, like Dan said, 30 days later for adult does that weren't bred. And he said for the fawns to be bred, that's pretty much always a function of body weight. So the southern Midwest states have probably the best or highest odds of a second rut. You know, you think Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, because those are ag belt states where the fawns got a chance to eat good food all year and get to that body weight. Because basically he said if they aren't to a certain body weight, then even if they get pregnant, they just abort it. So to have a second rut, you need does of pretty good sized body weight. So that was an interesting thing I learned a while back. IOPS 360, I think is the name. Dan, what have you learned or tried differently this year that has paid off, if anything?
I think one thing that is working for me a little bit this year, more so than other years, is I'm starting to see that I really have to start thinking a little more outside the box, which is kind of odd for me to say because I already think outside the box, right? But I'm starting to find that even the overlooked stuff is not overlooked no more. And I'm really having to force myself to seek out places that don't have trees, that don't have hunting trees, nothing a normal person would hunt out of. I mean, it can have trees, but not something that most guys would hunt out of. If it has trees, it seems like people are in there. If it has trees and deer cover. So I'm trying to seek out more of the stuff that people just don't even look at. They consider it garbage. And I'm finding the majority of the bigger deer in those areas because of the way pressure is ramping up in all the other areas. I think it's mainly because of Onyx and because of trail cameras. I mean, are really people get pretty bold about throwing cameras at places, even if they don't, think it's really a great hunting spot. They'll just throw a camera there, and then they get intel, and then they're like, "Oh, this is a good hunting spot." Right. And then they start getting the confidence to start checking more of these spots, and then they start to realize it's good. Where in the past, when they didn't put a camera there, they wouldn't waste a hunt there, and they never learned that, So finding the spots where they just won't go, where I'm getting in trees this big around, where you got to wade through water up to your waist, and then you get in there and it's just like dogwood with maybe one or two trees like this, and there's a spot in there you can get where the trails funnel together out of the bedding. Those spots seem to be paying off a lot more for me nowadays. And those same spots, I don't know if you follow the videos or not, but I'm sure not seeing the number of deer I usually see. Right. But I'm seeing bigger deer,
I'll be curious to see, you mentioned going back to Nebraska, and we had some conversations on the show about maybe, Jacob was getting into a lot of deer, but he was a little too aggressive. And he said maybe you and Eric needed to kind of mix in some of that. So I think going back this time, I'll be curious to see how you do. And I feel like it's kind of a new wrinkle for you this year too.
Yeah. I'm kind of real interested in hoping they have snow. I don't know if they will, looking at the weather forecast. I thought I saw some rain in the forecast and stuff, but I know we're supposed to get snow coming up here, which could be good because now I got a few days I can bow hunt. and I got to pattern some animals. And right now, the best way to pattern animals is to have snow on the ground for 2 days, because these bucks are really getting on, well, all the deer pretty much are really getting on a tight bed to food window. They might only be moving 300 yards total. They move out there and feed all night, move back. They bed in the food, move back. And they bed and cover, during the day. But you got to get in between that little window. And when all the deer are congregated, like the herd I saw today, it was 60 some deer, probably maybe 70. It was a lot of deer and a couple good bucks, and you look at that, and that's got to be most of the deer in the area. So if you went out there and there's snow on the ground, just about everywhere you look, you're not going to cut a track. All the sign you look at when there's not snow is like old sign that's like 2 weeks old, and it's like you're going to end up hunting that. But once there's snow on the ground, you can see exactly where they are now. So getting that snow is huge. You cover a lot of ground, find where those deer are. And what you're going to find is it gets easier and easier as you start to learn what to look for. They're going to be where there's food, and it's going to be dogwood. It's going to be corn. It's cut corn. There's going to be cut crops. It's going to be some sort of green something that's growing somewhere, whether it's something wild green or something private green. So you're going to look a lot at land borders, because the bedding's going to be a lot of the time on the public land, because the public land is going to have the cover. But the food's going to be on the private land, and you're going to be on the borders, right on the edges in a lot of cases. And it's really a matter of going from property to property to property looking for this. And in the evenings, driving around glassing for deer, because you're going to see them. Especially if it starts getting cold out, you'll see groups of deer out in fields feeding. And what you do is you drive around to public properties and look for those. And if you're not finding them, then dive deeper. Start looking at the dogwood. Okay, I can see a big red patch of brush out there. Is that full of deer? Another one of the issues that you're going to have is that, like today, what I saw was, 70 some deer. 3 bucks, 2 maybe shooters, right? Now, try and get a shot in one of those bucks with no leaves on a tree when there's 70 deer around you.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation. It's not easy. Try not to have one get downwind of you. You know what I'm saying? They're wandering all over the place feeding. It is not easy in any regards, but they are congregated and you can get on them. One thing that will help you is like when you see that group of deer like I saw, or you find that sign that shows you they're there, is to not just run in there like an idiot. It's not like early season where they're there one day, they're gone the next. They're going to be there for a period of time until something spooks them. Whether you walk in there or whatever you do, something's going to have to spook them and harm them to make them not want to be there. They're going to want to conserve energy. So sit back for a day and just watch them. Get your glasses on them. Where are they walking? Where are they coming out? How are those bucks moving? Where are they hanging? Where are they feeding exactly? How are they getting there? Where do they pop out of the beds? Because sometimes they're bedded right on the edge of the food. Then you got to be pretty crafty about how you get to the tree. So you're making a plan by watching them. And maybe you get to a point where, okay, that thing's going to cross by in range here, but I'm not going to get deer behind me. I'm not, this, I can cover this. And those bucks seem to be feeding right here. Maybe you got to get on the ground, because a lot of this is ground when there's no leaves in the trees. Get that little patch of cattails on the edge of a field or something. Or, if you're coming off a public, you got to be on the public. You can't be in the field. But watching them for a day helps tremendously. But then again, if you're sitting there on the side of a highway like this with binoculars watching a herd of deer for an hour and a half, people are going to notice that. Some might be hunters, and some might be landowners that just don't want you interrupting those deer, and they do something to harass you kind of. And legal or not, it's going to screw up your hunt. So I kind of want to be nonchalant about the way I'm watching those deer so people don't notice it.
Dan, we were talking about elk hunting before we got on today, and late season deer hunting sounds a lot like hunting elk during the rut, because you got a whole bunch of eyes. You got one or two targets. They're usually at the back. And usually if some outside source doesn't mess them up, they'll stay in the area. So, but it is a precision game, because you've only got one chance usually to get in there, and whether it's the deer in the late season or the elk during the rut. And it's like, the observation is key. I agree for sure. We got Tony Thorson wants to know, in farm country late season, if you booger deer, can you expect them to just move to the nearest safe cover, or will they just get out of the area completely?
A little of both. Sometimes if you booger them, you can go back in the next day and get another hunt. I kind of tend to, if I didn't booger them too bad, not go back day 2, because they come in day 2, even if they're not that boogered, skittish, looking around, paranoid, looking in the trees, watching for you,
later,
jerking on their move, right?
Yeah.
But if you give them a couple days to cool down and they keep coming back, 2-3 days, get a good wind, get some good cold weather, go back in there and take another stab at it. That usually you can make it pay off a day or 2 later. But you do get some that you bump them and they just disappear. They just take off. One of the big things they like to do is they don't want to abandon that food source, so they might start coming in real nocturnal, where they were coming in daylight, but now they kick way back into thick cover and they hold up until dark, and then they come creeping out an hour after dark, and then you got to play that game. But you still play that game. At least you still know where they're feeding. If you're kicking back further, especially if you follow the tracks, you could get back further, But again, you start creeping up back in further on them. Now you blow it again, and
or you blow all the does that are coming out first out because they're bedding closer. Yeah, it's tough. Late season is tough.
The best thing you can do with them things is kill them day 1, the first day you hunt them. And the way to do that is to make your mistakes from a distance with binoculars. Say, oh, if I would have been sitting there, I'd be screwed. It sounds like, well, do I really need to do that? I got tracks in the ground and stuff. And I can tell you, going in and doing this, I saw how many times I got busted just walking in or whatever, where deer were. I never would have dreamed a deer was bedded there, kind of thing. But when you do it with binoculars, you see that stuff and you're like, okay, here's what I got to do. I got to come in from way over there. I got to do this. I got to do that. I can't have my wind hit that. It makes for a much better plan, because I do think that hitting it right on the first time ups your odds. Your odds go way down next time you go in there and hunt. But they don't go out the window so much. You still have a chance if they're feeding there. And, sometimes you can watch those deer and they're coming out at night. And they're not where you can shoot them, in daylight, but they're coming into a section where you can shoot them. But it's like after hours, like a half hour after hours, and you're watching them, you're frustrated. Well, what you do is you wait for that time period when the weather gets really cold. And sometimes late season can be really patient. That cold weather, they want to come out early. They want to, especially if you get a cold, overcast day, maybe snowing. They're laying there getting buried in snow, and they'll just get up and start moving. And you'll see them move real early. There's certain types of days they move real early on. And if you're patient and you wait for that and you have enough time, that can be the kicker.
I've seen it out here too, and I don't know. I don't remember it happening quite as much in the Midwest, but if we get a real bad storm, like a 2 or 3 dayer where it's super, super windy, super blizzardy for 2 or 3 days, the first nice day after that seems like every animal in the world is out.
Oh, we get that here. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good time if you're, like you said, being patient, waiting for some of those conditions because you just need a little extra help sometimes. So if you can wait for those odds to be better. Bomad Outdoors says, Dan, when are you coming back to Pennsylvania? Because the stats on giant bucks are going way up the past 2 years, and there are some giants here. So yeah, you were in Pennsylvania on one of the public land challenges, right?
Yeah. Pennsylvania is a tough state for guys who film, because I forget what it was, but I think it was like near $1,000 that the hunting public had to pay for permits for each person.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Film on public land. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy amount of money. I don't remember what the actual dollar amount was, but you got to pay for a permit to hunt on public land, and it was quite a bit. Not to hunt, but to film your hunts.
Sure.
If you're gonna use it on YouTube, you have to pay for that. I think a lot of people just don't know that, but I can't take risks with laws, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going there. But the day might come where I go back and I just pay for the permit. I mean, I like Pennsylvania. I liked where I hunted. I thought it was a really cool area. I would go back, but I don't have any plans at the moment. I got a lot of things I want to do, and I've been there once, but I may go back.
Ryan Oldakowski says, Dan, what Arxis boots are you running early season and late season?
I'm running the same ones because they basically don't have a cold weather boot. So if it's really cold, I'm not wearing them. I'm wearing something else. If it's frozen out, I can wear the what are the boots we're giving away?
Lathrop and Sons. Yeah.
I can wear those if it's really cold out, but if I go put a boot through, I'm done, because I'm going to get wet.
Yeah.
But I do have some old Tide Wee really heavy, like 800-gram boots still. They're shredded and look like crap, but they're warm. But only if it's like, it starts getting to like below 15 degrees or lower, then I start wearing those warm weather boots. Otherwise, I just put some Hollow brand socks on, those alpaca socks, and they keep me plenty warm in the lighter ones. You can even put one of those boot warmers from Fleet Farm in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that, and I'll wear the Arxis ones. Now, for the life of me, I can't think of what the name of the boot is. If the guy says it, I'll know it. But
yeah, there's all like Viking themed, right? Like I forget the names of them too.
I thought it was Viking, yeah.
Yeah.
Just pick one you like. I mean, they all got buckles on them. I like the ones when it was gum leaf that didn't have a buckle. But all the Arxis ones have a buckle. But I just keep the buckle tight. They are actually a little warmer than gum leaves because the padding in them is just a little bit thicker. The liner. So they are a little warmer. But I don't want them hot because I wear them in warm season too. But they're pretty much my all year boot unless it's bitter cold.
Yeah, I mean, and Dan, one of the things we are doing, we're talking about the giveaway, and we're on the hour, so I'll announce it. We didn't have an exact guess today, so Frisco 94 was the closest. Frisco 94. So send me an email at thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com. That's all one word, thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com. I need your name, your shipping address, your boot size, and your phone number. So you're going to win one of each. Speaking of cold weather, the Lathrop & Son non-typical. You guys can see it's got the honeycomb there, kind of the same idea as a sleeping bag, trap warm air and keep your boot. And I watch Josh's channel pretty regularly, Josh Talker, before the Echo. He's done a few, not super scientific, but tests to show that those do work. I haven't worn them yet because my season's over, and I normally wear like a Western style boot, so I'm active all the time. And you're also going to win the Synergy insole. This is the insole that I have in my boots. It's kind of like a gel as opposed to felt. Super comfortable. That's my favorite part of the Lathrop & Sons boots that I wore this fall is the gel insole Synergy. Those are a little bit extra if you order a pair of those boots, but I would highly recommend those. So Frisco, again, one more time, congratulations, Frisco 94. I need an email at thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com with your name, shipping address, shoe size, and phone number, and I'll get that over to Steven at Lathrop & Sons. And Dan, we were talking about it. We're only 2 weeks away from the grand prize. Lathrop & Sons why can't I talk today? Generously, that's the word I'm looking for. agreed to give away a pair of their boots that I was just talking about. So that's like a $525, $550 boot. We're going to announce that. Yeah, we're going to announce that New Year's Eve. So not January. I'm on a roll today. I can't talk. December 31st, New Year's Eve. I'm going to try to get Steven on the show to announce the winner. So the deal with that, guys, there is a link in the video description. If you haven't signed up already, go to that link in the video, go to Lathrop & Sons. You have to sign up for their email list to be eligible. We won't be drawing a number that day. Steven's going to draw it from the email list, so make sure you're signed up for that.
I do believe that both Arxis and Lathrop & Sons give a discount to people that watch the show if you use code BEAST as well.
Yeah, so save yourself a couple bucks. Maybe buy yourself a nice pair of boots for Christmas or a hunter in your life. Gabriel Cameron says, Dan, would you ever break down the fort again or hunt that area again, Fort McCoy or Black River Falls State Forest?
Yeah, especially if I tag out in Wisconsin. I would be up in the fort pretty quick. I liked hunting there. It was pretty cool. And since I've been there, a lot of people that hunt there have been sending me pictures of the giant bucks they're shooting, and they're teasing me to get back up there.
Yeah.
But I would go back. Yeah, absolutely. As far as Black River Falls, I don't know. Every 2 or 3 years, I go up there and hunt. I'm probably going to be up there early season next year because I'll probably have a bear tag. So I'll probably deer hunt and bear hunt up there a little bit around Black River Falls.
Nice. There's been a couple comments about thanking me for being the host on the show. I want to real quick. I got 2 more shows left, but touch on it. Just to be clear again, Dan and I have no falling out or anything. I asked Dan if he could find a replacement for me a few months ago because I'm just kind of burnt out on doing the podcast and stuff, what I've been doing lately. And if people want to know, I don't have a channel or a website or anything, but call me a nerd. I've been getting real into photography with my girlfriend. So we've been doing a ton of that stuff. People have been asking, am I going to keep doing a show on my channel or anything? The answer is no. No more podcast hunting stuff from me other than to help Dan or Josh to fill in. So I will do that. I'll be glad to do that. Dan's helped me out a ton over the years. And like I said, Dan, if I haven't told you, I'll tell you again. A lot of the success, I would say a huge portion of it has been due to the things that I learned from the Beast Forum back in the day. I've been on there 10 years, and the tactics I learned from Dan, watched his videos. We were talking about the workshops, went to the workshops, all that stuff. And the people that have been on the site for the last decade have been hugely influential on me and my success. So that is all to say, thanks again, Dan. And the tactics do work if you put in the time. It's not an overnight success, but I've had no doubt way more success than I would have if I would have never discovered the hunting beast. So thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Frisco 94 says, Dan, Jeremy, do you ever find that exact scrape spots are repeated year to year? Short answer, yes. Dan, give us the long answer.
The long answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say as long as nothing major changes in the area, and by major, I mean logging, developments in the area, a total lack of ag that was there the year prior. Sometimes if there's a mass crop that's seasonal, red oaks or something that's totally gone. But if the tree is still there that they're scraping on and conditions are similar, especially like primary scrapes or bedding scrapes, yeah, right.
I've seen bedding scrapes disappear when you kill a certain buck.
Okay.
But for the most part, most of them reoccur. I've seen pressure kill them. Where people start hunting an area, they go away. I can remember like the Rome Legend buck would, every year he'd come up and run a scrape line right through the parking lot, right up to it's like a logging road that was the access for the property. And 20 people a day would walk up that trail. Some people walking dogs and stuff. And he had a scrape line going up that trail like you wouldn't believe. And that was the only buck that ever did it. He died, that scrape line died with him.
So there you go. Jimbo Slice, is anyone finding any sheds? little early, but Dan, we were talking about you've got a shed buck on camera and stuff. I normally don't start looking until, I don't know, early for me would be like first week of February. But normally it's usually middle of February or 1st of March on. And March 1st on, I really start looking hard. But
yeah, a lot of guys are looking here in January. We've got some guys already picked up antlers. You know?
Yeah. So it
I
is
can remember
happening.
a couple of times when we've killed deer, any antlers fell off, in December. I've found sheds while I'm hunting in December. I mean, every year there's always a few around. I remember one big buck I got with Dave that I missed it, and then we got on its track. It was a fresh snow, and he ended up shooting it in its bed. And I was circling around it, and he went straight up the track, and he shot it in its bed. And when we got over there, I says, "Well, hold it up for the pictures." He held it up like this, and the head fell, and the antler stayed in his hand. I mean, they start shedding about this time,
Yeah. Well, in our
wounded ones will shed faster. An injured one, a stressed out one that did a lot of breeding will shed faster. But one interesting thing about shedding, I had you can kind of learn from everybody. Like a lot of people will shun people that are like deer farmers and stuff. I could care less if they deer farm. I care less if people go there and shoot stuff. They still got some interesting stuff they can tell you. And a local deer farmer near my house ran into me someplace, and he was talking to me. And he said something really interesting to me. He told me that he keeps logs of when his bucks shed. And the same bucks, now this is in an unstressed environment because it's a game farm. These things are fed, year round. They're like pets, right? We all know what game farms are like, right?
Sure.
But he said that his deer, they all have a number and a name, and he logs when they drop their sheds, and like say buck 272 will drop its antlers, about March 1st every year. Sometimes it's March 2nd, sometimes it's March 1st. One time it's March 2nd and March 3rd for the two antlers, but it'll always be within like a 48-hour period. And he said that a whole nother buck in the herd that's even kind of related to that one genetically always drops, January 15th, right around there. Same exact time. And I found that just fascinating. He had the dates and the times. And every now and then you get one that lost an antler that was odd, that wasn't right to that time. But otherwise, they were pretty consistent per buck. Now, that's not as relative to wild ones, because wild ones, you get snowstorms, you get ice storms, you get extreme cold, things stress them, they'll drop early. But if they're not stressed, they're in a good environment with a lot of food, say you got private land and you got food plot, you got standing food and stuff, they seem to drop about the same dates.
That's interesting. I don't know how much it translates to whitetails, because I know they're yarding up in certain areas on food, or like you said, Dan, but I know a guy out here that's a really big mule deer shed hunter, and he's got a pretty amazing collection of giant sheds, like a bunch of single sides that are 80 inches plus, So you think about an 80-inch side, that's a 160 with no spread. You put a 25-inch mule deer spread on it, and that's a 180-inch deer. So pretty legit sheds. And I think he said 2 or 3 of his biggest bucks, he found multiple years of sheds within like a quarter-mile radius of where he found one. So that was always kind of stuck with me too, is you find one big one of an older deer to really look around that area pretty good, because you could find previous years. So fun fact there.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. John Bauer says, great show. And although eating tag soups this year in Wisconsin, Dan's tactics work, and had a few encounters this year, but just couldn't close the deal. Best of luck to you, Jeremy. Thanks, John. Stick with it. It
ain't over yet.
That's right. It took me.
Didn't you ever watch Rambo? It's never over.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you had a Facebook post for just recently of a buck that you shot late in the year on a late season hunt. Just the other day, I saw that. So that was real close to the end of the season, wasn't it? Last week or something like that.
I think that was. I thought it was like January 14th or something. It was on an extended season, I think.
Yeah. So pretty late. So yeah, I mean, if you look at it like that, you got a whole month left. You got all the time in the world.
Right. And there's so much of Wisconsin that is open on an extended season that there's some place near that guy that he can hunt.
Yeah.
If he wants to.
Let's see. I think we got maybe one more, and then we'll wrap it up there. Todd Hazlett. Todd, if I said your last name wrong, apologize. Dan, do you think hunting bottoms in hill country is good, or should I stay up higher on the ridges? Doesn't say if that's right now or during the rut, but maybe touch on a little of both.
Yeah, I think bottoms can be good as long as they're not too tight. You got to really watch the wind in the bottoms. You got to watch how the wind flows. I mean, you get a dropping thermal, and you get a wind over hills. And if it's too short of a valley, like if it's it gets bowlish, you're going to get a swirling effect. When that wind goes over, there's going to be a vacuum that makes it swirl. So getting the wind to go right down the valley where it keeps going lower and there's no backdrop, like a back hill on the other side. So like if you got a river bottom, if the wind is blowing down the river, well then the wind and the thermals are going in line with each other, and you can get in there going into the wind and probably not have a tumbling effect that day. But bottoms can be real tricky that way. But you can hunt the bottoms just fine. I mean, if that's where the deer are, if you have that wind advantage. I think the biggest advantage of the side hills is rut. I think they travel those side hills a lot in rut. And the side hills are nice for getting close to the bedding. I mean, they're usually on a point, watching a valley, a wind over the back. And sometimes you can get up to the edge of that point and get them when they go back, if they're going uphill. Downhill's harder. You got to get further back down into that valley or whatever. But, you hunt them wherever they go. If they drop, you hunt them down low. If they rise, you hunt them up high. If they're running the ridges, which is usually rut, you hunt the ridges,
Yep. Hunt the hot sign. That's the moral of the story usually, right?
Right.
Well, Dan, I want to wrap it up there today. So Frisco94, again, send the email. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today. Tons of members on too. People, I did see a question about the membership. You go to the main site, there's just a join button. You can join. Dan's got all the Beast DVDs are on there, and then some members only content. If you're trying to join and you don't see the join button, it's probably because you're on an Apple mobile device. So you need to join from a PC or an Android device. For some reason, YouTube and Apple don't like each other. There's nothing we can do about that. That's an Apple YouTube problem. So turn it over to you, Dan. Wrap up here.
Just thanks for everybody for coming on. If you're in a place that still has hunting available, don't give up yet. Hunting doesn't revolve around a 2-week rut window. Late season can be a good time to kill them too. And if you want to be successful, giving up is not an option.
Sage words, Dan, sage words. So appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll be back next week, same time, and unless we hear otherwise, but we should be back. And then again, 2 weeks from now, we'll get Steven on to announce the grand prize winner of the boot giveaway. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Catch you later.